The massive ship dropped out of hyperspace with a flash of blue light. Behind it came another ship, then another, until 200 war vessels filled the space around the small blue planet. Each ship was the size of a city, covered in thick armor and bristling with weapons that could crack a moon in half. Commander Vedthai stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking down at the world below. His 8-foot frame was covered in natural armor plating, and his claws clicked against the metal rail as he studied the planet. This was Earth, home to the species called humans. His yellow eyes glowed with satisfaction. "Sir, we have completed our jump," reported his weapons officer. "All ships are in position around the planet." Vestai nodded. The Zephyrian hegemony had conquered 17 star systems in the past 50 years. Each conquest had followed the same pattern. They arrived. They demanded surrender. The primitive locals either gave up immediately or fought briefly before being crushed. Then, the Zephyrians took what they wanted and moved on to the next world. This should be no different. "Send the standard message," Vestai ordered. "Tell them to surrender or face complete destruction." The communications officer activated the planetary broadcast system. His voice boomed across Earth in dozens of languages. "People of Earth, this is the Zephyrian hegemony. Your world is now under our control. You have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally, or we will destroy every city on your planet. This is your only warning." Vestai had read the intelligence reports about humans. They were a young species that had barely learned to travel between stars. They had no unified government and spent most of their time fighting wars among themselves. Their weapons were primitive chemical rockets and simple energy beams. They should surrender within minutes. The first responses came from various locations across the planet. Vestai stood pleas for mercy or offers of tribute. Instead, he got something else. Entirely. "Go jump in a black hole," came a transmission. "From a place called Australia." "Come and take it," replied someone. "From a region called Texas." "We've been waiting for you," said a calm voice from Japan. More responses poured in from every continent. Not one offered surrender. Instead, they were full of anger, defiance, and what sounded almost like excitement. Some humans were actually laughing. "Sir," the communications officer said, looking confused, "they're all saying no." Vesthai's claws dug into the metal rail. In 50 years of conquest, no species had outright refused their first demand. There were always some who tried to negotiate or beg for time. These humans weren't even trying to talk their way out of it. "Perhaps they don't understand the situation," he said. "Show them our power. Destroy one of their military installations." The weapons officer targeted what their scans showed was a major military base. A bright beam of energy lanced down from the flagship, turning several square miles of concrete and metal into molten glass. The response was immediate and baffling. Instead of panic, the humans began launching everything they had into space. Ancient satellites that had been floating dead in orbit suddenly came to life, revealing hidden weapon systems. Space stations that appeared to be simple research facilities opened up like flowers, exposing missile batteries and laser arrays. "Sir, they're shooting at us," reported the tactical officer. Vestai watched in amazement as Earth's defenses opened fire. Most of the weapons were clearly old and should have been useless against Zephyrian shields. But there were so many of them, firing from so many different directions, that his fleet's defensive systems couldn't track them all. A cargo ship somehow appeared behind his formation, moving at ramming speed. Before anyone could react, it slammed into a Zephyrian destroyer, both ships exploding in a ball of fire. The cargo ship had been packed with nuclear weapons. "How did a cargo ship get behind us?" Vestai demanded. "Unknown, sir. Our sensors didn't detect it until impact. More human ships were launching from Earth. Most were clearly civilian vessels, passenger liners, mining ships, even what looked like garbage haulers. But they were all armed now, bristling with weapons that had been bolted on in what must have been record time. A passenger ship that should have been running away instead turned toward the Zephyrian fleet. As it approached, transmissions poured from it. Hundreds of human voices singing something called Amazing Grace. The ship rammed into a Zephyrian cruiser just as the song reached its peak. "Sir, we're taking significant damage from these suicide attacks," the weapons officer reported. "Our shields are designed to stop energy weapons, not physical impacts." Vexday couldn't believe what he was seeing. Every other species they had conquered fought to survive. These humans were fighting to take as many Zephyrians with them as possible. They acted like death was just another weapon to use against their enemies. "Begin orbital bombardment of their major cities," he ordered. "They'll surrender when they see the cost of resistance." The Zephyrian fleet opened fire on Earth's largest population centers. Beams of energy that could melt mountains lanced down at cities that held millions of humans. Vexday expected to see panic and quick surrender. Instead, he watched in horror as the humans did something no sane species would ever attempt. As the energy beams struck their cities, the humans began evacuating through underground tunnels that seemed to connect everything. But they weren't just running away. They were moving toward the impact sites. "What are they doing?" he asked. The scanning officer's voice was filled with disbelief. "Sir, they appear to be collecting the molten metal from the bombardment sites. They're using it to make weapons." Through the scanner feeds, Vexthai watched humans in protective suits gathering up the liquefied remains of their own cities. Within hours, they had built new artillery pieces from the metal and were firing it back at the Zephyrian ships. The humans had weaponized their own destruction. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a new transmission from the planet." "Put it through." A weathered human face appeared on the screen. The man was old, with gray hair and scars across his face. He was smiling. "Welcome to Earth," the human said. "Hope you brought enough ships." Then he cut the transmission. Vexthai stared at the dark screen, his claws trembling. In 17 previous conquests, not one species had managed to damage his fleet significantly. These humans had destroyed 12 of his ships in the first 6 hours. And they were just getting started, for the first time in his career. Commander Vexthai wondered if the Zephyrian hegemony had made a terrible mistake. Vexthai had expected the space battle to last hours. It had been going on for 3 days, and his losses kept growing. Every time his fleet destroyed a human ship, 2 more appeared from somewhere else. They came from hidden bases on asteroids, from the dark side of the moon, even from inside what looked like ordinary space junk that the humans didn't fight like any military he had ever faced. There was no central command to target, no main fleet to destroy. Every human ship seemed to have its own plan, and those plans were all completely insane. A human mining vessel had somehow attached rockets to a large asteroid and hurled it at his formation. The rock was moving too slowly to be a real threat, so he ignored it. Then it exploded right in the middle of his ships, revealing that it had been hollowed out and packed with nuclear weapons. Another human ship kept transmitting what appeared to be cooking recipes, while ramming Zephyrian vessels. The pilot was apparently teaching people how to make something called chocolate chip cookies right up until the moment of impact. "Sir, we need to land ground forces," his tactical officer suggested. "We can't fight this many ships at once. If we take their planet, they'll have to surrender." Vexthai agreed. His fleet had been designed to fight other fleets, not swarms of crazy humans with improvised weapons. Ground combat was where the Zephyrians excelled. They were bigger, stronger, and better armed than any species they had encountered. "Deploy all landing forces," he ordered. target their major population centers. Thousands of Zephyrian dropships launched from the fleet, heading for Earth's surface. Each ship carried 50 warriors armed with plasma rifles and personal shields. They had conquered entire worlds with smaller forces. The first sign that something was wrong came when the dropships started exploding before they reached the ground. The humans were firing at them with everything they had, including weapons that made no sense. One dropship was destroyed by what appeared to be a giant slingshot that hurled a school bus into the air. Was that a primitive projectile weapon? Asked the weapons officer. I believe so, sir, came the reply. They launched a ground vehicle at our ship using elastic bands. Those dropships that did make it to the surface found themselves landing in carefully prepared traps. The humans had dug holes and covered them with thin material that looked like solid ground. When the heavy Zephyrian ships landed, they crashed through into underground chambers filled with explosives. The first wave of Zephyrian warriors who survived the landing found themselves facing the strangest enemy they had ever encountered. The humans didn't line up in formation or try to fight honorably. Instead, they hid everywhere and used weapons that defied all military logic. Children threw bottles filled with flaming liquid. Elderly humans fired hunting rifles from windows and then disappeared into hidden tunnels. Scientists had somehow turned their laboratory equipment into weapons. One group had rigged their particle accelerator to fire office chairs at supersonic speeds. Report from the surface, the communications officer called out. Strike Team Alpha has taken 40% casualties attempting to secure a single city block. How is that possible? Vexthai demanded. That's a veteran unit. The humans are using unconventional tactics, sir. They've weaponized everything. One of our warriors was killed by a modified kitchen appliance. Vexthai pulled up the tactical display showing the surface battle. His forces should have been winning easily. Zephyrian warriors were 8 feet tall, covered in natural armor, and armed with energy weapons. The humans were small, soft, and mostly using primitive chemical projectiles, but the humans weren't fighting like a military. They were fighting like a plague. Every building was a fortress. Every civilian was a potential combatant. They used tactics that no military academy in the galaxy would teach because they were too dangerous, too unpredictable, or too insane. One group of humans had taken over a shopping mall and turned it into a death trap. They used the escalators to create kill zones, rigged the fountains with explosives, and somehow convinced the recorded music system to play deafeningly loud war chants. When Zephyrian forces finally cleared the mall, they found the humans had escaped through the ventilation system. Another human group had evacuated a hospital, then waited for Zephyrian forces to occupy it before revealing that they had replaced all the medical equipment with bombs. The explosion could be seen from orbit. Sir, Strike Team Beta is requesting immediate extraction, reported the communications officer. They say the enemy has weaponized playground equipment. What does that mean? Apparently, sir, the humans have turned children's slides into missile launchers and swing sets into catapults. They're using a merry-go-round as a rotating gun platform. Vexthai watched the tactical display in growing horror. His forces had captured several city blocks, but the cost was enormous. For every 100 humans killed, he lost 20 Zephyrian warriors. And the humans kept coming. They emerged from sewers, dropped from buildings, and appeared from hidden tunnels that seemed to connect the entire planet. The worst part was that the humans were clearly enjoying themselves. Intercepted communications showed them laughing, singing, and making jokes even while under fire. Some were placing bets on how many Zephyrian ships they could destroy. Others were apparently holding contests to see who could come up with the most creative way to attack. Sir, the scanning officer called out. We're detecting massive movement in the underground tunnel systems. It appears the humans are evacuating most of their population from the combat zones. Good. That should reduce their resistance. No, sir. They're not just evacuating. They're moving toward other areas and setting up new defensive positions. It's like they're playing some kind of game where the objective is to make us chase them around the planet. Vexthai realized with growing dread that the humans had turned his invasion into entertainment. They weren't fighting to defend their cities. They were fighting because they wanted to see what would happen next. A new report came in from the surface. A group of human children had somehow captured a Zephyrian dropship and were using it to attack other Zephyrian positions. When asked how children had overpowered trained warriors, the survivor explained that they had used candy as a distraction, then attacked with modified toys. Sir, his tactical officer said quietly, "We've been fighting for 6 hours and have secured less than 1% of the planet. At this rate, it will take us years to conquer Earth, and we'll lose most of our ground forces in the process." Vexthai looked at the casualty reports. He had started with 50,000 warriors. He now had 37,000, and they controlled only a few city blocks. The humans had turned urban warfare into an art form, and they were treating his invasion force like practice targets. "Pull back all ground forces to defensive positions," he ordered. "We'll bombard the planet from orbit until they surrender." But even as he gave the order, Vexthai knew it wouldn't work. These humans had already shown they could weaponize their own destruction. They would probably find a way to use orbital bombardment against him too. As his dropships began retrieving the surviving ground forces, a new transmission came from the planet. It was from the same old human who had welcomed them to Earth. "Thanks for the warm-up," the human said, still smiling. "We were getting a bit rusty. You can go home now if you want, or stick around for round 2. Your choice." Vexthai stared at the transmission in disbelief. The humans were treating the bloodiest battle of his career as a warm-up exercise, and they were offering him the chance to surrender. For the first time since joining the hegemony, Vexthai wondered if there were some species that should never be invaded at all. Vexthai sat alone in his command chamber, staring at casualty reports that made no sense. In 3 days of fighting, he had lost over half his fleet to a species that should have surrendered in the first hour. The humans were fighting with weapons made from garbage, using tactics that violated every rule of warfare, and somehow winning. He had to understand what was happening. These couldn't be the same primitive humans described in the intelligence reports. Something was missing from their information about this species. "Computer, access all available data on the human species," he commanded. The holographic display showed the standard files. Humans were a young species, barely 5,000 years old by galactic standards. They had achieved spaceflight only recently and had no unified planetary government. They spent most of their time fighting wars among themselves over resources, territory, and something called politics. None of that explained why his advanced military was being defeated by creatures that use kitchen appliances as weapons. "Computer, expand search to include all classified hegemony databases." Access denied. Insufficient clearance level. Vexthai entered his commander codes. As fleet leader, he had access to most classified information. The computer accepted his codes and new files appeared. These were military assessments of various species, tactical analyses, and battle reports from previous conquests. Still nothing that explained the humans. "Computer, expand search to include all galactic databases." Maximum classification levels. This time, the computer hesitated. "Warning. Some files require special authorization due to extreme classification. Do you wish to proceed?" "Yes." New files appeared. These marked with symbols Vexthai had never seen before. The classification level was listed as Galactic Council Eyes Only, Restricted Planetary Species. One file caught his attention immediately. It was labeled Sol System, Quarantine Zone. Do not approach. Quarantine Zone. Earth was under quarantine? Why hadn't anyone told him this before authorizing the invasion? Vexthai opened the file and began reading. What he found made his blood turn cold. The file was over 3,000 years old. It described a galactic crisis that had nearly destroyed all intelligent life in this part of the galaxy. An ancient machine intelligence called the Devourers had appeared from dark space, consuming entire star systems and converting all matter into more machines. The Devourers were perfect killing machines. They couldn't be reasoned with, bribed, or stopped. They had technology far beyond anything the galactic civilizations possessed. In 50 years, they had consumed over 200 star systems and were accelerating their expansion. The galaxy's greatest civilizations had thrown everything they had at the Devourers. The Altarian Empire's planet killer fleets. The Zephyrian hegemony's best warriors. The Crystalline Collective's reality warping technology. Nothing worked. The Devourers adapted to every weapon, learned from every tactic, and grew stronger with each victory. Billions died as the machines swept across the galaxy like a plague. The surviving civilizations retreated to heavily fortified core worlds and prepared for extinction. Then the machines made a mistake. They attacked a small, yellow star system on the edge of known space. A system with one inhabited planet, populated by a species so young they had barely learned to build cities. The species called themselves humans. Vexthai read faster, his claws clicking against the display as he scrolled through the files. The Devourers had expected to consume Earth in a matter of days. Instead, they found themselves in a war that lasted 3 years. The humans didn't fight like any species the Devourers had encountered before. They didn't rely on advanced technology or superior numbers. Instead, they did something the machines couldn't understand or predict. They improvised. When the Devourers destroyed their weapons factories, the humans made new weapons from scrap metal and chemistry sets. When the machines adapted to their tactics, the humans invented new ones on the spot. When their governments fell, individual humans continued fighting on their own. The Devourers had been designed to fight civilizations. The humans fought like a virus. The files contained battle reports that read like fiction. Humans had jury-rigged their own space stations into kinetic weapons. They had turned their planet's entire communication network into a computer virus that infected the Devourers' systems. They had somehow convinced a group of machines to develop emotions and then talked them into having nervous breakdowns. One report described how human children had reprogrammed captured Devourer drones by teaching them to play video games. The machines became so obsessed with achieving high scores that they forgot about their original mission. Another file showed how human scientists had weaponized their own mathematical proofs. They had broadcast paradoxes that caused some Devourers to shut down when they tried to process the logical contradictions. But the most disturbing file described the end of the war. The humans hadn't just defeated the Devourers. They had corrupted them. By the end of the conflict, entire fleets of machines were following human commands. Confused about their original purpose and convinced they were supposed to be protecting rather than consuming, the remaining uncorrupted Devourers had fled back to dark space. But not before sending a final transmission that was recorded by galactic monitors. It was a simple message. Warning, do not approach Sol System. Species classification, hostile. Threat level, extreme. Recommend permanent quarantine. The machines had been afraid of the humans. Vexthai sat back in his chair, trembling. The file continued with reports from galactic civilizations that had visited Earth after the Devourer War. None of the visits had gone well. The Altarian Empire had sent a diplomatic mission to thank Humanity for saving the galaxy. The humans had somehow convinced the ambassadors to stay for dinner, gotten them drunk on fermented fruit juice, and talked them into sharing advanced technology. The ambassadors woke up the next morning with terrible headaches and no memory of how they had agreed to give the humans antimatter reactors. The Crystalline Collective had attempted to study human society. Their research team was found 3 months later running a small restaurant and claiming they had achieved enlightenment through something called customer service. Every species that made contact with humanity came away changed. Some became obsessed with human culture. Others developed strange new philosophies. A few simply disappeared, last seen heading toward Earth with their entire families. The Galactic Council had finally declared Earth off limits. The official reason was cultural contamination risk. The real reason, according to the classified files, was that humanity was too dangerous to interact with any species capable of defeating the devourers through pure creativity and stubbornness. Was not safe to be around. Vexthai closed the files and looked at his current tactical display. His fleet was being torn apart by creatures that the galaxy's most advanced civilizations were afraid to contact. The humans weren't just winning through luck or desperation. They were doing exactly what they had always done, turning their enemies' strengths into weaknesses through impossible improvisation. A new alarm sounded. "Sir, we're detecting massive energy signatures throughout the Sol system." The humans appeared to be activating hidden installations. Vexthai pulled up the sensor display and felt his heart stop. Weapons platforms that had been disguised as asteroids were coming online all around the system. Shipyards hidden behind the gas giants were launching vessels that dwarfed his flagship. Energy readings suggested the humans had been building defenses for thousands of years. They hadn't been caught unprepared by his invasion. They had been waiting for it. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet." The same old human appeared on his screen, but this time he wasn't smiling. Commander Vexthai of the Zephyrian Hegemony. "We know who you are and why you came here. We've been watching your species for decades, waiting to see if you would be smart enough to leave us alone." The human paused, and when he continued, his voice was cold. "You weren't. Now you get to find out why the galaxy has a quarantine zone around our planet. We really hope you brought enough ships, because what you've seen so far was just us being polite." The transmission ended, and Vexthai realized with absolute terror that he had made the same mistake as the Devourers. He had awakened something that should have been left alone, and unlike the machines, he couldn't flee to the safety of dark space. The human fleet was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Ships that looked like they had been grown rather than built emerged from hidden docks inside asteroids. Vessels that seemed to be made of living metal flowed through space like metal sharks. And in the center of it all was a massive ship that his sensors couldn't properly scan because it was somehow older than his entire civilization. Vexthai watched his remaining 30 ships try to form a defensive formation. As hundreds of human vessels surrounded them, his fleet had started with 200 of the most advanced warships the Zephyrian Hegemony had ever built. Now he had barely enough ships left to fill a single squadron. "Sir, the human fleet is not attacking," reported his tactical officer. "They're just watching us." That was somehow worse than being under fire. The humans were studying them like scientists examining interesting insects. Vexthai could feel the weight of thousands of human eyes, analyzing every move his fleet made, cataloging their weapons, their tactics, their weaknesses. "Sir," his communications officer said urgently, "long-range sensors are detecting something disturbing. The human installations throughout the system are launching what appears to be construction equipment." Vexthai looked at the sensor display and felt his soul leave his body. The humans weren't just mobilizing their defenses. They were building. Massive industrial platforms were extending from the hidden shipyards, beginning work on vessels that were already larger than anything in his fleet. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the trajectory calculations his computer was running automatically. The construction platforms were building ships designed for long-range travel. Ships designed to follow hyperspace signatures back to their point of origin. The humans were preparing to follow his fleet home. Computer, estimate construction time for the human vessels currently under construction, he ordered. Based on observed construction rates, primary vessels will be completed in approximately 14 hours. Secondary fleet estimated completion in 36 hours. Warning: construction rate is accelerating as more automated systems come online. 14 hours. In 14 hours, the humans would have a fleet capable of reaching Zephyrian space. And based on what he had seen of their creativity and complete lack of military sanity, they would probably arrive with weapons that turned stars into bullets. "Sir," his science officer called out, "we're detecting strange energy readings from the human homeworld. They appear to be opening something." The sensor display showed Earth, but now there were massive structures rising from the planet's surface. Things that had been hidden underground for thousands of years were emerging into the light. Ancient installations that predated human spaceflight by millennia were coming online. "Sir, those structures are emanating energy signatures consistent with the Devour War records. The humans have been building defenses for 3,000 years." Vexthai realized that everything he had seen so far, the impossible defenses, the creative weapons, the insane tactics, had been humanity holding back. They had been fighting with a tiny fraction of their actual capability, probably because they didn't want to completely destroy his fleet before they could study it. They had been treating his invasion as a learning experience. "Sir." Incoming transmission from the human flagship. A new face appeared on his screen. This was a middle-aged human woman with gray hair and cold eyes. She wore a uniform that looked ancient but well-maintained. Behind her, Vexthai could see a bridge that seemed to be carved from a single piece of metal, with controls that looked organic rather than technological. "I am Admiral Chun of the Earth Defense Force," she said. "You are Commander Vexthai of the Zephyrian Hegemony. Your species has a home system located approximately 47 light-years from here. You have 3 inhabited worlds and a population of roughly 12 billion individuals." Vexthai's blood turned to ice. The humans already knew everything about his species. They had been watching, studying, preparing. "You came here expecting to conquer a primitive world," Admiral Chun continued. "Instead, you found the species that ended the Devour War through pure spite and creativity. Now you're wondering if you can get home before we decide to visit your worlds personally." "What? What do you want?" Vexthai managed to ask. "Originally, we wanted you to go away and leave us alone. We put up a big warning sign that said, 'Dangerous species. Do not approach.' Your government apparently can't read." Admiral Chun leaned forward in her chair. "Now we want to know why you thought invading Earth was a good idea. More importantly, we want to know how many other species are going to make the same mistake." The truth hit Vexthai like a physical blow. The humans weren't just angry about being invaded. They were worried about being invaded again. And their solution to that problem was to make sure no one would ever consider attacking Earth a second time. They were going to make an example of the Zephyrian hegemony. "Please," Vexthai said, his voice breaking. "We didn't know. We didn't know what you were. The quarantine files were classified beyond our security level. We thought you were just another primitive species." "Ignorance isn't really a defense," Admiral Chun replied. "But it is an explanation. The question now is what to do about it." Vexthai looked around his bridge at his remaining crew. These were warriors who had conquered worlds. But now they looked like children who had accidentally broken something valuable and were waiting to be punished. Our fleet is preparing to follow your hyperspace signature back to Zephyrian space, the Admiral continued. We estimate arrival in approximately 60 hours. We've been building ships specifically for this possibility for quite some time now. The sensor display confirmed his worst fears. The human fleet wasn't just building warships. They were constructing vessels designed to carry entire armies, mobile shipyards, and what appeared to be artificial moons equipped with weapons that could crack planets. Please, Vexthai begged, abandoning all dignity. We surrender, unconditionally. Take our ships, take our technology, take anything you want. Just don't follow us home. We have younglings. We have civilians who had nothing to do with this decision. I know, Admiral Chun said, and for the first time her expression softened slightly. We've been monitoring your home system since we first detected your species. We know about your families, your culture, your art. You're actually quite an interesting people when you're not trying to conquer others. Hope flickered in Vexthai's chest. Then you'll let us go? That depends on you, she replied. We need to make sure this doesn't happen again. Not just from your species, but from any species. The galaxy needs to understand that Earth is not available for conquest. Admiral Chum stood up, and Vexthai could see the bridge behind her more clearly. The walls were covered with displays showing star charts, but not of local space. They were maps of the entire galaxy, with various species marked and categorized. We're going to offer you a choice, she said. You can return home as conquering heroes who decided Earth wasn't worth the trouble. You'll lose some ships to mechanical failures during the retreat, and your government will mysteriously receive detailed information about our defensive capabilities. This information will be shared with other species, along with a strong recommendation that they update their maps to show Earth as uninhabitable. And the other choice? Vashti asked, though he was afraid to hear the answer. Admiral Chun smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. We follow you home and demonstrate to the entire galaxy exactly why Earth has been quarantined for 3,000 years. We turn your invasion into the most famous military disaster in galactic history. And then we start visiting other species that might be considering similar actions. Vexthai looked at his tactical display one more time. The human fleet was growing larger by the hour. Ships were emerging from hidden bases throughout the solar system. And the construction platforms were working around the clock to build even more. We choose the first option, he said quickly. Good choice, Admiral Chun replied. One more thing, Commander. When you get home, make sure your government understands something important. We didn't defeat your fleet because we're more advanced or because we have better weapons. We defeated you because we enjoy solving impossible problems. She paused, and her smile grew wider. And we're always looking for new problems to solve. 3 months later, Vexthai stood before the Zephyrian High Council, delivering a report that would change galactic politics forever. His remaining 20 ships hung in orbit around the hegemony's capital world. Their hulls bearing scars from weapons that shouldn't have been able to penetrate Zephyrian armor. The humans accepted our surrender, he concluded, on the condition that we share all intelligence about their defensive capabilities with the galactic community. High Counselor Zethmar studied the data tablet in front of him. It contained detailed scans of human technology, tactical assessments of their fighting methods, and most importantly, the classified files about the Devour War. These files suggest that Earth destroyed the most dangerous threat the galaxy has ever faced, he said slowly, using improvised weapons and what can only be described as organized chaos. Yes, sir. They turned their entire planet into a weapon. Every citizen is a potential combatant, Every building is a potential fortress, and every piece of technology is a potential bomb. Vextha had spent the 3-month journey home writing his report, but he still couldn't adequately describe what he had witnessed. How do you explain a species that weaponized their children's toys? How do you describe soldiers who sang cheerful songs while ramming starships? What about their current military capability? Another counselor asked. Impossible to estimate accurately, Vextha replied. They have installations throughout their solar system that have been hidden for thousands of years. Their industrial capacity appears to be designed around the assumption that they will always be outnumbered and outgunned. He activated a holographic display showing the human fleet that had surrounded his forces. These ships were built using technology that combines multiple scientific principles in ways that should be impossible. They don't follow standard design philosophies because they don't need to. Humans treat physics like a set of suggestions rather than laws. The council chamber fell silent as the counselors studied the tactical data. Every simulation they ran ended the same way. If the Zephyrian hegemony had continued fighting, the humans would have followed them home and won. What do they want from us? High Counselor Zethmar asked. Nothing, Vextha replied. That's what makes them so dangerous. They don't want our territory, our resources, or our technology. They just want to be left alone to do whatever it is humans do, when no one is trying to conquer them. He paused, remembering Admiral Chun's final words. They view military conflict as entertainment. They've spent 3,000 years building defenses against every possible type of invasion, and they were genuinely excited to test those defenses against a real enemy. The truth was even more disturbing than that. During the 3-month journey home, Vextha had received several transmissions from Earth. They weren't threats or demands. They were thank you notes. The humans were grateful for the invasion because it had given them something. Interesting to do. One transmission had been from a group of human children who thanked him for helping them test their school science project. They had apparently won some kind of award for building the most effective improvised weapon. Another message came from human scientists who were excited about the new research opportunities provided by captured Zephyrian technology. A third transmission was from the old human, who had first welcomed him to Earth. The man thanked Vextha for providing what he called the most fun we've had since the Crystalline Collective tried to establish a trade outpost. The humans hadn't just defeated the Zephyrian invasion. They had enjoyed it. Sir, Vextha continued, I recommend that we immediately share this intelligence with all known spacefaring civilizations. The humans were very clear that they want the galaxy to understand Earth is not available for conquest. And if we don't share this information, then they will share it themselves, along with a practical demonstration of their capabilities. High Counselor Zethmar activated the emergency galactic communication system. Within hours, detailed information about Earth and humanity was transmitted to every known civilization in the galaxy. The response was immediate and universal. Panic. The Altarian Empire immediately reclassified Earth from potential colony world to galactic hazard zone. The Crystalline Collective updated their star charts to show the Sol system as containing a black hole, hoping to discourage any of their citizens from traveling there. Accidentally. The most extreme reaction came from the Vegan Trade Confederation, who had apparently been planning their own invasion of Earth. Upon receiving the intelligence files, they immediately disbanded their war fleet and sent a formal apology to Earth for even thinking about conquest. They included a gift of advanced agricultural technology and a promise to name their next trade station New Friendship in honor of their desire to never anger the humans, but the intelligence. Sharing had an unintended consequence. Instead of keeping everyone away from Earth, It attracted the attention of species that wanted to study humanity from a safe distance. Scientists, philosophers, and military strategists began building observation posts at the edge of human space, fascinated by a species that had defeated impossible odds through pure creativity. The humans' response to this increased attention was characteristically unpredictable. They sent welcome gifts to the observation posts, care packages filled with human art, literature, music, and something called chocolate. They offered to share scientific knowledge and cultural information with anyone interested in peaceful contact, but they also sent a subtle message with each gift package. Hidden among the friendly offerings were detailed technical specifications for the weapons they had used against the Zephyrian fleet, not as a threat, but as a reminder of what happened to uninvited guests. 6 months after the failed invasion, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session to address what they called the human question. Representatives from every major civilization gathered to discuss how to deal with a species that was simultaneously the most dangerous and most friendly threat they had ever encountered. The meeting lasted for 3 days and accomplished nothing. How do you negotiate with a species that defeats armies using kitchen appliances and then sends you cookies as an apology for the inconvenience? In the end, the Council passed a resolution officially recognizing Earth as a sovereign world under permanent protection status. Any species attempting to invade, colonize, or threaten humanity would face the combined response of the entire galactic community. Not because the galaxy loved humans, but because they were terrified of what humanity might do if they felt threatened again. The resolution passed unanimously. Vexthay retired from military service after filing his final report. He had done his duty to the hegemony and to the galaxy by sharing the truth about humanity. But he could never forget Admiral Chun's final words to him as his fleet prepared to leave Earth. "Commander, your species isn't evil. You're just young and made a mistake. We've all made mistakes. The important thing is learning from them." She had paused, looking out at the vast human fleet surrounding his ships. "We learned from our mistakes 3,000 years ago when the Devourers tried to exterminate us. We learned that the universe is a dangerous place, and the only way to survive is to be more dangerous than everything else." Then she had smiled that terrifying human smile. "We also learned that the best way to keep the peace is to make war so expensive that no one can afford it. Thank you for helping us demonstrate that lesson to the galaxy." Now, as Vexthay sat in his home on the hegemony capital world, he often looked up at the stars and wondered what the humans were doing. Building new defenses? Inventing new weapons? Or just going about their daily lives, secure in the knowledge that the galaxy would never bother them again? He suspected it was all of the above, because that's what humans did. They prepared for every possible disaster while hoping it would never come. They built weapons they hoped never to use and defenses they hoped never to test. And they treated the entire deadly business like it was the most natural thing in the universe. The galaxy had learned an important lesson from the failed invasion of Earth. Some species were too dangerous to conquer, not because they were aggressive, but because they were creative. The humans had turned military defeat into victory, invasion into entertainment, and total war into a learning experience. They were proof that the most terrifying thing in the universe wasn't superior technology or overwhelming numbers. It was a species that could look at any problem, no matter how impossible, and ask, "But what if we tried anyway?" The answer, as the galaxy now knew, was usually something that would give entire civilizations nightmares for centuries. And somewhere on Earth, Admiral Chun was probably planning for the next uninvited guest who might need a lesson in galactic etiquette.